21 Grams is back, and welcome to the third iteration of our show. And in this iteration, we are offering a one-on-one interview with indie artists, and we're going to examine three very specific aspects of the creative soul. The cerebral, which will be all about the chess moves and deep thoughts that go into the aspects of the work and creating the work. The emotional, which will be all about the investment the artist has made in the work and creating it. And the practical, which will all be about the application of common practices, tropes, and ideas. Tonight my guest is Josh Nealis. He is an indie author and comic book creator and owner of Cutthroat Comics. That being said, I'm your host Joe Compton, and let's get deep into it. Here now is a new episode of 21 Grams. Hello, everybody. Welcome to the show. I have the awesome Josh right there for us. And it's nice to see you, my friend. And welcome to the show.
What's up, man? How's it going?
Yeah, pretty good. Miss Stewart says hello. Hello, AF Stewart. We've had conversations before, but I'm kind of curious to kind of get the ball rolling and to talk a little bit about your right now in our profession and in our nomenclature. Anti-hero is becoming a bad word. Really, it's becoming like it's almost like people don't want to be labeled an anti-hero. They feel it's too tropey or anything like that. But I get the sense from your characters and what you write that you embrace it a little bit, or at least is it that, or is it? Do you like to call it like protagonist with an edge kind of idea? Because you have some very colorful and interesting characters that you follow through on, not only on the comic side but in your novels as well. And so I'm kind of curious if that's something you gravitate toward.
Yeah. I mean, I guess I didn't know that was becoming a bad word. But yeah, I don't really, in my books and in my comics, I wouldn't say anybody is like a full-on hero or a full-on bad guy. As most people are in real life, nobody's 100% good, 100% bad. But I find the best villains in particular are the ones where you're like, yeah, he's kind of right, or she's kind of on the right track, or you can see their point of view at least. And even if it's just a little bit, if the reader can identify with certain aspects of any of the characters, they're going to gravitate towards that, I find. For me, I don't even characters like the Joker, which, I'm not knocking the Joker. I've got no problem with the Joker, but, I don't identify with just straight madness. I mean, because that's all, he's just chaos incarnate.
Right.
But when you get into characters like the Scarecrow or even the Riddler, even Harley Quinn on some levels, it's, you have to find something where you're like, okay, and like the whole Thanos was right thing, like,
yeah,
stuff like that. It makes it more interesting, I think. And yeah, that goes for your antagonist and your protagonist and your antagonist.
Do you design them the same way then? Is that the idea, is to kind of give them both the idea that they're doing what they're doing because they're right?
For me, it's more about what's their motivation, what are they trying to accomplish, and how they feel about certain things. Why are they doing what they're doing? Do they have a thirst for power? Were they scarred as a child? Are they romantic and they just really want to find pure love? I mean, each character has that own kind of thing, I think.
So you take it character by character, not so much, I'm going to do the antagonist this way, protagonist this way. It's the character, right, and whatever they're following you through and pushing you through, that's how you're going to kind of portray them.
Yeah. Depending on, and obviously it's I talk about when I'm writing a book, it's like putting together a puzzle. You're gonna have
Yeah.
some pieces and stuff, and you just kind of got to figure out how they fit together. So, usually, for instance, when I'm writing a novel, I'll just kind of start writing, and I'll kind of guide myself to the plot points, um, and then when I go back on my first read through, that's where I'm looking at shoot, what's the word I'm looking for? Well, I guess on the second read through is character and dialogue, and
Okay.
the way they speak and the things they say need to lead to where their arc is going to go. Continuity. The first read through is continuity.
Mm-hmm.
If a girl has blue eyes in the beginning, she needs to have blue eyes in the end. Stuff like that. And I'm always looking at that, but typically it's continuity first, and then get the characters right on this. Because by the time you've written it, because I read as I go, like I do.
Mm-hmm.
I think we've talked about before. I'll write so many words. The next day I'll read and then fix and then write and
Yeah.
add on, kind of ladder it down. So I've already read it once by the time I've written it. So yeah, by the third read, I've got a pretty good feel of what I want out of each character and all that. So that's usually where I'm like, okay, time for character building and dialogue.
Is your sense of story pretty built in nowadays? Because you've published quite a bit now. I mean, and especially with a comic where and we've had this conversation before about page turning, and you have to get it within this certain amount of time. You only have so many pages, and you have so much you have to do
Mhm.
with accomplishing that. So you feel like when you're writing a novel, you're a little bit more set with the story aspect of like you just mentioned, finding the plot points and stuff like that is kind of built in at this point for you, or do you still have to remind yourself of those?
Yeah, I mean, comics are a little more difficult because there is a set number of pages that I'm shooting for. Books, the difference between 55,000 words and 60,000 words is
Yeah.
doesn't matter.
Yeah.
So it's a little more loose. You can describe that thing a little better than you normally might in a comic. Usually the comics I'll get about halfway through, and then I'll write down, page 13, 14, 15, 16, 17, 18. I'll write exactly what happens on each page. That way I can make sure I end where I need to end, and I can kind of, cut what I need to cut and everything.
Right.
So it's a little more strict on what you can put into it. But
When you're tightening up the novel, though, do you feel like the philosophy is the same? You want them to turn the page, so you're kind of trying to visually, enhance their experience by, making sure that the meat is to the right, essentially, and that what they're doing is going to turn the page for them in the next thing, or is it a different thing? Do you feel like that there's a different pacing? And you just mentioned that in novels you can write 60,000 words, it doesn't matter, but
yeah.
do you find your pacing kind of speeds up a little bit because of your comic background?
Um, yeah, but I think, in movies, when I watch a movie, the pacing is a big deal, I think.
Yeah.
Um, but I think in books, it doesn't necessarily have to be paced well. It just
Yeah.
has to be interesting. I mean, you can't have a scene that's pointless or
Yeah.
doesn't mean anything. It has to have weight and gravity to it.
You
In my
can, but
opinion.
nobody would read
Right,
it.
right. Um, so yeah, and that's part of it too. When I go back
Yeah.
and I do my rereads and stuff like that, I'm always thinking like, all right, how can this scene be more interesting? How can it be more? I mean, depending on what it is, how can it be more intense, more creative, more interesting? I did a TikTok about that a while back, and I just kind of said, when you're writing or creating or drawing, whatever it is you're doing, get it plain, but then make it more, like
Mhm.
I said, more interesting, more intense, more funny, more ridiculous. Whatever you're going for, take it up a notch because I do cons all the time.
Yeah.
I see other writers and other artists and what they're doing, and a lot of times I see it, I'm like, okay, you have something there, but you didn't turn it up a notch. You didn't turn it up to 11. You just kind of did what everybody else does.
Yeah.
And unfortunately, the day and age we live in, we are in the attention business, and if If you go over to a corner at a party and you go like this, nobody's going to see you. But if you stand in that same corner and go like this, everybody's going to see you. You have to take it up a notch if you want to get people's attention and get them to check out your work.
And you have to be creative with it too. You can't just
Yep.
do the same thing that the other guy's doing to get attention
Yep.
sometimes.
Yep. That's
Mhm.
something I pride myself on. I like to think that the things that I make are definitely one of a kind, or
Uh-huh.
pretty close to it. You're never going to come up with a totally original idea,
No.
but you can take the things that, whether you're aware of them or not. I mean, I start everything with the assumption that somebody's already done something like it, but I try to make it my own and put a spin on it that I think nobody else has done. Like the best example I give of that is my one character, Blasphemer, who's the gay Amish superhero. Like,
Mhm.
I am almost positive nobody's done that.
Mhm.
Maybe, but I doubt it.
Yeah. I doubt it too, and
Yeah.
that's awesome. I you know, you and I have similar journeys in that, we've been through some stuff and we worked a lot on ourselves. And I'm
Mhm.
kind of curious from your perspective. I know what it's done for me in my writing, but I'm kind of curious what it's done for you in your writing. Has anything changed for you because you have worked so hard to get the person you are right now, and you're still working at it. And so I'm kind of curious if that's something that you have incorporated into your writing a little bit. Do you feel like that's seeping into your writing a bit?
Oh yeah, absolutely. Um, as you get older, you meet shitty people and they treat you poorly, whether you
Yeah.
deserve it or not. On top of, you make your own mistakes. There are plenty of times where I look back and I go, I was probably the dick in that situation. And that's part of how to write a good character, because as I mentioned, nobody's 100% good, nobody's 100% bad. You find a good place in the middle somewhere, where they're 80-20 or 90-10, or whatever you want to do, and that's what's going to motivate the character to do the things you want them to do.
Mhm.
You can't just have, and then the good guy killed somebody. It's like, well, that doesn't really work. You don't take that giant swing. You have to plant the seeds where that character, in the first couple chapters, and then at the end they do kill somebody. You're like, oh, I can see why he did that.
Mhm.
So and morality is a big thing in a lot of my writing.
Mhm.
As it probably, I would assume it is in most people's.
Mhm.
Um, I'm I like to think I'm a good guy. I try my best to be, not saying I'm always making the right decisions and saying the right things.
Mhm.
Um, but I mean, yeah, most days I drive for my day job. So I drive probably 20 to 25, 30 hours a week. Um, and I don't really listen to music. I just sit there and I think about scenarios and, what would I say in this scenario? What would somebody else say? And if they said this, what would I say? I'm always trying to think like morally, what's the right thing to do in any certain situation. So I throw that into all my characters.
That's awesome. I love that idea because I mean, it's so hard to to make that interesting sometimes too because people want the denigration. Sometimes they want to root for bad guys. They want to see that so they don't feel so bad about themselves and what they're doing, kind of idea. A lot of times too, it's a
Yeah.
weird society thing that we're in right now, a weird bubble and weird mapping that we're kind of navigating through at this point. And it's kind of interesting that you know we all search for the morality, and I think a lot of us put go over the top with it a lot of times, and so to hold it back, graying the characters is a great way to do that, right? And to show mistakes and not be afraid of making mistakes,
Yeah.
even as a character.
Yeah. Oddly, like my last book just came out like a month and a half ago or something like that.
Hmm.
It's Hellscape Contra the Flies, which it's a prequel and a sequel to just Hellscape.
Hmm.
And I knew who I wanted the main character of this one to be, and I got 15, 20,000 words into it, and I was writing it, and I was like, you know what, like, the hero's the bad guy of this book.
Hmm.
Like I was like, it would be way more interesting if he ends up being the bad guy. So
Interesting.
that's what I did, and eh, right there when I'd made that decision, the whole book flipped totally over, and I was like, now this is interesting
Hmm.
because I think as the reader, you read the first one, then you're going into the second one, you're like, okay, this character is going to be the savior of everything, and then you're like, whoa, hold on now. So I think made it way more interesting, and I haven't heard any feedback because only a handful of people have picked it up so far at cons and stuff. But
Well,
it,
everybody go get it and read both books. Read
yeah,
both.
yeah, they're really good. I tell people they're not like Lord of the Rings or Harry Potter, but they are in the sense that they're like extremely detailed and deep and thought driven, and like it's world building 101 basically. So if you're into that kind of stuff, those two books are pretty damn good, I think.
You have kind of gone multi-genre in a lot of aspects. I mean, comics have certain genres, but they also can gray genres a lot too because because it's so tough to tell a story within the page count that you have to tell it in anyway. So trying to world build on top of that is a little difficult because but you could do that visually, so it doesn't
Right.
really translate as much as it needs to in a novel. But are you because of the nature of your business and selling as much as you do you think about, how you can group certain genres? Are you worried about alienating audiences at all? Or do you feel like you're just going to write what you love to write and not worry about any of that?
Mm, so the the core of what I want to do with my career is write whatever I want to write. If I have an
Hmm.
idea for something, I'm not going to shy away from it if I think it's a good idea.
Right.
For instance, my next novel that I'm going to start probably early January is going to be like a romantic comedy,
Oh, nice.
which I've not quite done yet.
Nice.
I've written like a couple little love stories and a couple of my short stories books, but nothing like full on romantic comedy. But really, as I got into this and I started doing comic cons and stuff like that, I'd have people come up to my table and I'd say, "Well, I have this and this and that, and what do you like?" And when I don't have something for them, I'm like, I gotta get to that. I need to have something for everybody.
Nice.
And I mean, I've seen my sales just grow and grow and grow because of that.
Ah,
Not only, I mean, I do deals and stuff at my table and stuff too. I feel it's like 3 for 40 or something for the novels and all that. But I try to upsell. It's
nice.
like okay, you were interested in Cocaine Stripper Stronghold, which is like a zombie thing. Um, but hey, you get a deal if you buy a couple more. So why don't you grab Stuffed Squirrels and Porcelain Angels and one of the kids' books, or something like that. So it's just
I
good
love that.
business. It's good
I
business
love
and it's more fun.
I love that multi-genreing is now a great sales tool. That's fantastic. I
Yeah,
never thought of it that way. That's pretty
yeah,
cool.
yeah. I mean, it's I quote or I talk about like Stan Lee said something along the lines of like write the stories you want to write and hopefully
Mm.
everybody else will like them too. It's something along those lines.
Yeah, yeah.
But I mean, I when I first started writing, and even when I was in my band that I think we've talked about before,
Mhm,
um, that was one of the things when we first started. I said, let's just write the songs and stuff we want to write, and hopefully people like them. And
mhm.
that's how I am with my stories and stuff. I write the books that I would want to read that would interest me, and I think I've done a good job of putting things together that other people enjoy too. I get a lot of repeat customers, so
Mhm.
that's always nice.
How has it changed for you? I mean, you've done a lot of cons this year and a lot of conventions and a lot of festivals and things of that nature. How has it changed for you? Do you feel like it's back? Do you feel like it was back like it was before the pandemic, or do you feel like there's a different thing to it now?
I mean, it kind of feels the same. I mean, I would almost say it's maybe even better.
Yeah,
I think,
because people were clamoring for so long.
yeah, maybe. It's hard to say because I had less stuff on my table than,
Sure.
'cause when the pandemic hit, I was like, well, I can't go to cons, so I might as well knock out a bunch of work. And that's what I did. I wrote like 2 or 3 books and 2 or 3 comics during that time. So when I came back out, I had way more stuff on my table.
Mm.
Um, so it's hard to say if it's, better or worse. I've really had only 1 or 2 stinkers over the past couple years since I've been going back. So before, I remember it was like every other. It was like almost every other con was like, womp, womp, there's nobody here.
Mm.
So
That's kind of cool.
yeah,
That makes for a nice year.
yeah. It's the goal is to do this full time and quit my day job and
Yeah,
just straight up be a writer. Because like I literally like salivate just thinking about how much shit I could pump out if I didn't have to spend 8 hours a day somewhere else. Like
yeah.
it would be insane. Like I would probably pump out 3 or 4 novels a year on top of 4 or 5 comics probably. So it's
I would do they take equal amount of time to put together, or are comics a little bit easier? I mean,
well,
the drawing aspect is probably the hardest aspect of the comic, I would say.
yeah, a comic. I mean, eh, probably 3 4 months roughly
Mhm.
because of the drawing and my main artist guy. He has a job and all that too that he has to go to. So,
Mhm.
um, but a book. I mean, it just kind of depends on what it is. I think the first Hellscape book took me 2 years.
Yeah.
But the second one I pumped out and I didn't actually pay attention, but it was like 5 6 months.
Mhm.
The kids books I think I wrote the second kids book in like a month,
Mm.
um, which is Judy and a big stupid bully. Um, and then like Cocaine Stripper Stronghold, I want to say it took like maybe 3 or 4 months. So that one's a little bit shorter, but it was a fun write, that's for sure.
Nice. I mean, you're venturing into Kickstarter again, and I, I'm curious from your perspective. I'd love to hear from because the comic community has been so rallied behind the Kickstarter and the crowdfunding movements, and I'd love to hear your perspective from. Why do you think the comic community rallied around this aspect of the business, and why has it been so important for a comic creator to have a crowdfunding experience?
I'm not probably the best person to talk about. I've done 3, and then I published a book for another creative team, Tales of Shock and Terror.
Hmm.
So 4, we've done 4 technically. And we do okay on them, but we're not breaking the bank on those.
Hmm.
A lot of people I know put a lot of time into those, and they live on Kickstarter and live for them, which
Yeah,
is which is great. I would love to. It's almost gives me anxiety thinking about the amount of money that they're doing because I know what kind of work goes into packing and shipping all those books and everything.
sure.
Not to say, I
And all the perks and everything else that goes
yeah,
along with having to fulfill that as well.
yeah. I mean, I guess if I did 20 grand on it, I'd be happy as shit, I suppose. But uh, right now, I'd love to hit just 2K on it. I
Hmm.
treat it more of like a pre-order thing, kind of.
Hmm.
And we do like exclusive covers that are limited print runs and stuff like that. Try to make it worth people's time to look at it and invest in it. But really, it's just I think comic creators probably like them, especially people like me who are coming out of pocket to pay our artists because the artists more often than not they want paid for their work up front, which I get. They put a
Yeah,
lot of time into that. Um, so we have to come thousands of dollars out of pocket, then plus printing costs and all that. So I think it definitely helps, and I think probably the caveman of the comic creators that was the first one to crawl onto Kickstarter and learn to walk. They probably were like, "Shoot, I just paid for my comic, before it's even out," which is amazing. So it helps for sure.
what's the aim when you do a run? What do you usually kind of base that on? Do you base it on pre-sales, or do you base it on projections? How do you determine what you're going to do on a run? And how many you're going to print out to start with?
So what I do is like my A cover, like the main cover or whatever book is, I'm just gonna print them until I feel like not printing them anymore.
Okay.
Um, then like the variants, um, are like 200,
Mhm.
220, somewhere around there. So like one of my artists gets paid in comp books, and so his are 220 because I print 200, he gets 20.
Mm.
Um, and then usually I'll throw in a couple extra for them too, anyway, just because, especially if we're doing like a double signing, like from the same spot.
Mm.
I definitely try to make sure they've got some left on their table because then we can get people going back and forth. Which
Yeah.
Rodney Fike and I did that a few weeks ago, and it worked out really well for both of us.
Nice.
But like the Kickstarter exclusives, like let's say 18 people order that book, you have to print 25.
Yeah, yeah.
Um, so I keep one for myself, and then the rest are in a box back there, and I'm never going to sell them. And I'm hoping that one day they'll be worth thousands of dollars, and then my kid can sell them after I die.
Are you so I remember collecting comics as a kid, and I'm not bashing comic books by saying that it's a common thing I think that people say, but and it's kind of people will get all whoa, but I don't have a thing. I don't have an aversion to comics or collecting them anymore. I just don't have time to go and invest, you know,
Mhm.
looking at them and figuring out what I like and all that. It's and but the collector aspect of it, it was always fascinating to me. The whole white glove approach with putting the whiteboard and then creasing, making sure that that it's covered and all of that. Do you do that with every issue that you print? Do you create that collector's experience, or do you just print them out and then when you hand them to somebody at a table, do they buy it with that collector aspect of it, or do you just hand them the raw book?
I push it. So like my variants, the ones that are like limited print run, I bag and board those.
Hmm.
Everything else is loose on my table. But there's a price difference. The I charge just 5 for my regular covers, and then the variants are 10.
Mm.
So it's an upcharge, but because of that, I bag and board it, and I
Hmm.
make sure they know, like, hey, this is a 200 print run. Make sure you hang on to this because you never know.
Yeah.
You never know. I might get a movie one of these days, be a big shot. Um, but yeah, I tell people all the time, like when they find out I collect comics and stuff, and I'm single, so like when I talk to girls on the dating apps or wherever, I'm like, you don't understand. Like it's not. I mean, yes, it's a nerdy thing, but
Yeah.
it's like a serious hobby. Like there's a lot that goes into it.
Yeah. It's
Between
an investment.
Oh yeah, yeah. Between speculation and
Hmm.
trying to buy low and sell high
Hmm.
and all that. Like you can't see the rest of my room, but there are comics everywhere. I can show you. I got comics lining the walls,
Yeah.
and
Like
that's just one room. I have another room.
yeah.
That dark room back there is all comics and stuff too. Over that way.
Are those your covers on the wall there in the frames?
Oh no, that's from a video game.
Oh, okay.
There's a video game called Oddworld, and these little aliens were eating other aliens, and those are the posters for like the
Oh,
alien
neat.
foods. But so I put that in the kitchen. It made sense, right?
Yeah, it's a commodity, right?
Yep.
It's like trading soil or trading, corn.
Yep.
It's kind of they go up in value or they devalue, and you
Yep.
have to treat it like that because if you
Yep.
don't, then you won't get full value, right? So,
Yeah, I've hit pretty good on a few of the comics I have.
mm,
There's a couple comics right in front of me. I bought them for like 130 bucks, and now they're like $3,000 on eBay. So,
mm,
and I will sell sometimes, but not books I like. Like the books on my walls are books I like. I'm keeping them, but I've bought a couple collections and stuff, and I'm flipping them a little bit. But yeah, it's interesting. It's like crypto or any of that other
yeah.
stuff. You're trying to like, get a leg up in this world.
I was just listening to an interview with Kevin Smith, and he was talking about how his next graphic novel is going to be NFT'd, and I'm curious what you think about NFT right now.
Yeah, I don't know a whole lot about it. I kind of get the gist of it.
Hmm.
For me, I mean, nobody's gonna buy a book that I wrote. for it to be worth me selling it to them
Mhm.
and be like, here you go. And it's not
You
like I
fully
can.
embraced the digital aspect of the comic world, though. So is it that further off? Is it a little bit more difficult to make it kind of NFT ish at that
Yeah,
point?
yeah, it's hard to say. I don't know if I have a really good answer for that. I don't
Hmm.
know that I would. I'm a curmudgeon when it comes to newfangled things. So
Yeah.
I'm always like, even like TikTok was out for a couple years before I was like, all right, fine. You know,
Yeah, and you don't do a lot of writing aspects on your. Well, you do some of it, but
yeah,
I appreciate I follow you on TikTok, and well, I appreciate the conversations you do have because they are, I you and I are in a similar place, and we're both
yeah,
single and doing that and exploring that aspect of things, and you do talk a little bit about that for yourself, and I appreciate that. Have you found it fun to do TikTok? Are you embracing it, or you just kind of like it's a chore? Because I found it's really I feel like I'm editing something else that I don't want to fucking edit. I just want to, I would rather just put out a video and just go, okay, here you go. And that doesn't get anything. You have to do the fancy dance to get
yeah,
seen.
yeah. It's tough. It's like anything else. You have to put time into it.
Yeah.
And unfortunately, I have, limited amount of time to do
Yeah.
stuff like that. Usually, most of my TikToks are me driving around for my day job, and I'll have a thought or something that I want to say, so I put it out there. Every now and then, I'll have something that's a little more elaborate
Mhm,
to do. I've done a couple like little goofy things.
mhm,
Um, to be honest, if I were to quit writing in general,
mhm.
I would be awesome at TikTok. I think I could come up with all kinds of stupid things to do on there. But a lot of my creative energy goes towards other things.
Mhm. Have you looked at like animating your stuff or looking at, possibly kind of venturing off into a world where it's more visually, more not appreciated. Appreciate's the wrong word. I'm trying to think of a good word, but where it's more of like movies and television that people are gravitating toward these days, and they're consuming a lot more of that.
Right.
So, have you looked at some of your stuff because you have some deep weld series that you've either completed or virtually on the grasp of completing, and you've done a few trilogies here, and I'm kind of curious if any of those you've thought about, you know let's put or are you just waiting for somebody to say, hey, are you or like me, because like I will come from the film background, and I'm like, I don't really want to. If I'm writing a novel, I'm writing a novel. I don't really
Yeah.
want to be the one to make it into a movie, because I did. If I wanted to do that, I would have made it a movie to start with, right? So I wanted to write it as a novel because I had more to say and wanted it to be more internal and whatever. And if somebody wanted to take it from me and make it into a movie, I'm totally fine with that. But I don't have a problem with that, and I have no problem not being involved in it. I'll give it, well, I won't give it to you. You have to pay for it, but
Right.
you know, I'll do that. I don't have a problem with it. Are you kind of in that vein, or do you want to see yourself get into that kind of realm and to be more involved with it, because you are very involved with every aspect of your business?
Oh yeah. When I'm writing anything, whether it's the comics or the books, I don't know how other people think and do it.
Yeah,
I think of the way I write in terms of how I would see a movie on a screen.
yeah,
I know I've had several people come to me and they're like, when I was reading this book or that book, like I could see it as a movie in my head, and I was like, well,
yeah,
that's kind of how I write it. I because I'm foreseeing hopefully that will happen one day.
yeah,
Um, you know, if anybody, not anybody, but if somebody were to approach me, with a significant amount of money and good ideas, then hell yeah, I'd sell it. But I mean, depending on how much they give me,
mhm,
I would more, they would have to pay me off to not be involved in it, because I would be like, well, I want to be a producer. I want to help with casting. I need to be, help write the screenplay. Like, other people can guide me because I wouldn't know any of that. But like,
yeah.
let me have my voice in this so we can make sure it's true to what, you know, I'm the writer. I put it together. So Yeah, but, if somebody was like, "Hey, here's $1,000,000. Can we just have this?" I'd be like, "Yeah, it's yours. I'll write something else." I love all my stuff,
Are you
but
sentimental about anything? Like maybe like Carl or Pedoman? Are you kind of more sentimental towards the like the older stuff you did that you would be less likely to just roll over and give it up, or it doesn't matter?
if there's enough zeros, you can have everything. I've thought about that because, yeah, I mean, like I just said, like, I'm gonna write other shit. Like, I'm gonna
Yeah,
write
yeah.
other stuff. Like, I don't expect myself to ever run out of ideas because every
Mhm.
time I get within 2 to 3 ideas of being out of ideas, then it just hits more stuff hits me. So, yeah, I mean, that's the goal. I would love to do that. That would be
Yeah.
amazing to, even if it were like some indie studio
Yeah.
or something wanted to do any of my things, I would be on board.
I'm curious too in that aspect of it, to thinking about how all that process works, and I know how that works, and that I'm curious from your perspective if there's some of your older stuff that you plan to revisit later on. Are you looking at other stories, or is it just when the moment hits you? Do you feel, or do you have a done point? Do you feel like when you get to a certain point, like you've written some trilogies and haven't gone back to them, and I'm curious
Mhm.
if that is the end for you and you're okay with that, you're good with ending stuff, or do you feel like you always leave it open for the possibility of going back to it and doing something else in that world?
So my first novel, The Stuffed Squirrels and Porcelain Angels,
Hmm.
I wrote it and I left that one open. And then it sold really well. Like I said, it was my first thing, and I sold like 300 copies that first year, I think, something like that.
Nice.
Something when I first did it, I was like, man, if I can sell like 100. But
Yeah.
yeah, I'm pretty sure I sold like 300 copies or something like that. And I was like, all right, well, that's a thing. So I wrote the sequel, which is called Stuffed Squirrels and Porcelain Angels Bereavement. And I found that I was running out of ideas for that one. Like, I was like
Mm,
really struggling to hit the word count. So that one ends, and it's a definite ending. And but then I realized later, I was like, oh, there's one character from the first book that I didn't even include him in. So when I wrote my second short stories and poem book, it's called You'd Be Surprised with a Vengeance. I wrote his story and
nice.
closed it off. So once I wrote that, I was like, this is everybody from that book has their ending. So that book is done. So that well is gone. Um, and Hellscape, there's going to be a third. I already have that one's a different story because that one I can just I've not run out of like content for that one.
Hmm.
Um, it just kept going and kept going, and I almost had to be like, all right, this is where it's going to end because this is a good place to stop.
Hmm.
And almost immediately, like in the days following completion of that book, like I was already putting notes in my phone for the next one.
Nice.
So I want to say that it'll have one more, but I mean, who knows where that will go? It could be, a longer series than that.
Hmm.
And the comics are, I mean, that's a never-ending thing. I don't see that ending. There's going to be. I have like a team of like teenage superheroes, so they're going to get their own thing, and I would love to do a blasphemer series because he didn't get a series yet. So I mean, I don't see an ending in that necessarily either.
I asked that question because knowing the process of if somebody was to come to you with an offer that was to your liking and said we want to take this, what they're taking from you is the property. That's what they want.
Right.
So you would you ever think about, would it have to also be the right thing that they're offering for you too, not just the money, but because then if they take the property, they may say it may revert back to you in 5 years or whatever it
Right.
goes, but if it's perpetuity and the movie hits right, they're gonna want to cash that merchandising forever, right?
Right.
So I'm curious if that changes your perspective on whether you would just give it up or not.
Yeah. I mean, that's. we've all heard the stories about, Kevin Eastman, for instance, the Turtles, where he signed away his rights or whatever, and
Yeah.
it sold. And there's probably a thousand other examples that I can't think of offhand. Happens a lot in the music industry. Um, Again, it would be eh, the dollar amount would be one thing. Whatever else is in the contract would be another. Am I ever getting it back? How involved am I?
Mhm.
Um, but again, I look at it like you think about, you have one thing that hits, and then all the other doors start to open. So
Mhm.
it almost might be worth letting one thing go, just to get your foot in the door, and then all the work you've put in, now the opportunity is right in front of you.
Yeah.
It'd be a decision, that's for sure. But again, I mean, if somebody,
It's a nice decision they may have to
yeah,
make.
I'd be happy to be in that spot.
Yeah.
So, but I listen to a lot of podcasts from
Mhm.
a lot of comedians and people in the entertainment industry. And I want to say it was like Tom Segura. Don't quote me on this. I want to say just the other day he was talking about, not giving up his intellectual property, or he was saying sell it or something. Somebody was
Mhm.
saying sell it, and then you got guys like Dane Cook who are like never sell it. So it's,
Mhm.
everybody has their own take on it. But unfortunately, I'm not in the position where those guys are, where they have, they've already opened the doors. They can do what they want with their IPs. So I'd
And
love to be in that.
it's a tightrope walking that, because
You know,
you could piss off the wrong person and never get another chance.
yep,
You could they could, as you said, open the door, sprout flowers and never ending flowers, and those could sprout gold, who knows. But and then it could also be that it leads to people wanting you to continue the story down the road too. There's George R. R.
yep,
Martin is a great example of that. And when
yep,
Game of Thrones came out, people were like, you've got to fix these wrongs, George. You've got to write some stuff that's going to fix this stuff, right? And
yep.
so there's all of that. But I was just curious, I mean, obviously we're getting way ahead of ourselves here, but it's
Well,
always great to travel
hopefully
down
not too
that
far ahead. That'd be
road.
sooner rather than later. Yeah, and even, I've talked about I talk a lot about relationships, like on TikToks and stuff like that.
Mhm.
But even on dating apps and stuff like that, or even if I start seeing a girl, like if she starts sending like spicy texts or whatever, and they're like, "Why don't you say something?" I'm like, "No." And because I joke with my friends all the time, I was like, "Watch, like eventually one of my books will take off, and then 2 days later, some girl's gonna be like, 'Look at these texts,' and
Yeah.
there it goes, you know." So I'm like, "Nope, not doing it." So yeah, it's
Yeah, we're a little older, so we can
yeah,
we have that perspective a little bit. I
yeah,
mean, I'm sure you remember as much as I do that there wasn't social media when we were growing up, so it was a lot easier to be
yeah,
a little bit more bobose and you know.
yeah. My buddy and I were just talking the other day about how the original Yellow Ranger had died.
Yeah.
And we were like, it's kind of sad that she didn't get, the Green Ranger that passed away the other day.
Yeah.
She didn't get the outcry of love that he's getting,
Yeah.
because social media wasn't even a thing. And honestly, we didn't even know she died until years later. So it's a it's a
Yeah,
different world, that's for sure.
for sure. I uh, I'm curious. So, is this comic venture you're about to do with the Kickstarter? Is that a brand new thing, or is it a part of a universe you've already existed in?
So the Turkey Sharks, which is on Kickstarter right now, is Turkey Sharks 1, 2, and 3. So 3 is the new book. You can get caught up on not only Turkey Sharks 1 and 2, but all my other comics are on there as well. But they're kind of like my Avengers. It's all my characters rolled into one. I was doing 3 separate series, and their story arcs more or less ended. So
Hmm.
now they're all in one series. It's easier to do one series than 3, I find. Even though eventually I'm going to taper off into the Rascals and maybe some other things. But I wanted to build through Kickstarter with just one series. And the Kickstarter is going okay. I'd love to see it hit $2,000. We hit 1,600, I think, with the last one,
Oh,
and,
nice.
and I think we hit like 1,250 with the first one. So I want to keep gaining momentum with it.
Mhm. Sure.
But we
That's
got
that's we keep moving up, right?
Yeah, we
Keep
got
moving
5 days
up.
left, and we're sitting at like a little over 1,300. So there's a ways to go yet. So I'm trying to
Mhm.
push pretty hard.
Nice.
And there are deals on there too. My books are actually, like the variants I said were 10, they're actually 8 on the Kickstarter. So you actually can get bundles, and they're cheaper there, and the prices go up outside of that. So I try to get people to, open up their wallets.
Mm. What has been your biggest um growth as a writer? Where do you feel like you've grown the most?
I hope it's my dialogue.
Hmm.
I think most people would probably agree that's probably the toughest thing,
Hmm.
because the voice in your head is you, and it's hard to speak as somebody else
Mhm.
and write as somebody else. Um, and that's been it's hard because I know when I go back, like I said, on the third pass is dialogue, and it's hard to go, oh, this character wouldn't say it like that, or they use smaller words because they're stupid, or they're very intelligent. So now I have to use the damn thesaurus to find bigger words that I don't even know. So it's again, you go back to what's their motivation, what are they trying to accomplish from what they're saying to the other character. um, so it's I think dialogue. I think usually my ideas and concepts have been pretty good, so
Mhm.
I think I've always been good with that. uh, but definitely dialogue, probably.
Is it more apparent, the growth in your dialogue in your comics, or you feel like the novels show it off more?
It's probably both, honestly.
Yeah.
um, I always felt like I was being lazy in my novels a little bit because I wouldn't have these big, long, um, like monologues and stuff.
Mhm.
Um, I think I've tried to like make the things they say a little longer, but usually I think of it like a dance, as you would in real life, because these aren't regular conversations. Most people are not going to have these conversations just on a whim. You
Right.
have to bulk up the drama and stuff, so you can really kind of take a little freedom there, and make them be a little over dramatic or over romantic about things. So
Are you as someone who sees things visually as movies, is that safe to say then that you are a subscriber to the 3 act structure?
um I keep it in mind,
Yeah.
but I don't know that I'm doing it exactly correctly. Um, but more or less, I think about, okay, here's the first part, and then in the second part, and then the third part, I'll kind of change up the tone, or make things go a little quicker, or
Mhm.
stuff like that. But I never went to college specifically for writing, so I'm not going to say I'm an expert on it or how to
Mhm.
do it. But I think I have found my particular voice, and the way I word things and play up dramatic parts and sad parts. And
Mhm.
in a lot of my books, there's very uncomfortable parts that are being written. I hope nobody clips this out, but I've murdered children in my novels, and stuff like that. And those are hard to write, but it makes the book interesting, and it makes the characters interesting. Um, so yeah, it just kind of depends on what's going on.
Mm. Is there a line for you? You talked a little bit about you want to be moral and you want these characters to have some morality. Do you feel like there's a line that you won't cross so that you can stay in that zone, or do you feel like you can always bring them back if you go too far?
You mean as far as like what a character might do?
Yeah, I mean, you just talked about killing children, so I'm
Yeah.
curious if you have something that you won't have a character do, or if they try to take you that direction, you try to steer it a different way. Is there is there that line for you?
Probably not, to be honest. There probably is not a line.
Mm,
If, I'm not just gonna the reason the one character murders the child, uh, there's a reason for it in the book.
mhm,
Um, and it's a callback basically is in the first hellscape something happens, and I think that even when I wrote it, it's in my head. I pictured it again, like I would picture a movie. I was like, this would be kind of interesting if this happened this way. And in the second book, I was like, people might wonder where that came from.
mm,
So the murdering of this child explains why in the first book that happened. Kind of, it gives light to that. So I can't say I would hold back if it made sense for the story and made sense to explain why a character is why they are or anything like that. Like I've in one of my books, there's a statutory rape scene, and it's not graphic necessarily.
mhm,
I'm not saying I wouldn't write that, but boy, that was tough. I'm not
mhm,
gonna lie. It made me uncomfortable to write, even though I knew it was compelling.
mm,
And it explained a lot about the character that it happened to. Um, I mean, I would say no to that, but I mean, you never know. It definitely it can be uncomfortable. Like I've written sex scenes in
mhm,
several things, and it's weird. I think it's just weird to write that kind of stuff, but you know, if it fits, it, I think as long as it's not there just cause, like if you're like, I want to write a sex scene because no reason, if it's there for a reason, then it's fine.
yeah, that makes sense. I'm curious how you feel about character deaths. Do some of them stay with you a little bit longer? Are you someone that has to kind of absorb it a little bit before you move forward from that, or is it something that you're really, you know, you plan it out so you don't have to do that? What's your approach as far as when you do kill a main character or a big character, or even, I mean, even a small one to a certain extent? What is your approach on killing characters?
Yeah. Usually it's is the audience going to expect it?
Hmm.
Because if I think, and I can't even say that's true. Sometimes it's expected, so they'll die. Other times it's like, maybe they won't expect this. But again, it still just goes back to, when I'm thinking about how I want the story to go, it has to make sense. It has to be a character's death, I feel, has to have some type of poetic reason for it.
Hmm.
Um, it can't just be because, you know, just because they deserve it.
Time to
Like, yeah,
die.
yeah. And sometimes they do deserve it, but
Hmm.
it has, yeah, it just there's one character in Hellscape, the second one, that dies, and they probably deserved it more than about any other character I've ever written. And I'm not gonna lie, when I because it's a big scene,
Yeah.
and as I was writing it, I was like, man, I almost feel bad for this character, but they deserve it so much. Like I went deep into this person, like tormented and everything, but it's a great scene. It
Mhm.
really is. It's very very fluid and it's interesting. I think basically they die like four times before they actually die. it's it's because it deals with dreams and stuff. I don't want to give away too much in case anybody reads it, but it's when I had the idea, I was like, that's a good idea, so I wrote it, and it was fun to write. I'm not gonna lie, but I did feel bad about it a little bit, even though it's an awful character and they deserved it.
Do some of your hero deaths stay with you a little longer? Do you feel like there's characters you've really gravitated toward that kind of linger for you in thinking about it?
Mm, I mean, a little bit. I don't ever regret it for sure.
Yeah,
'Cause, I mean, they're not real, but
yeah. I get that. Yeah.
yeah, just sometimes it makes sense, and sometimes they don't deserve it. But to make it real, I mean, because in life, a lot of people die that they don't
Yeah.
deserve to die.
Yeah.
Um,
And sometimes it's when you don't expect it, right? So
yep, yep. There was a couple characters in my comic that died, but luckily there I had a loophole, so they're back for now. I don't know that they'll get that loophole again. So
so don't misbehave is what you're telling them basically.
yeah, yeah. I did actually. I wouldn't say I felt bad about it, but I was like,
uh,
I shouldn't have killed them so quickly. So I found a way, but I don't. If they die again, I won't find another way. So, but right now they're fine. They're safe.
for now. Well, Josh, this has been a wonderful conversation, man. I really appreciate you taking the time to talk to me, and thanks for rescheduling. On top of that, I really appreciated
Oh
that
yeah,
too.
it's no big. Actually, this worked out better because I think I had to get up pretty early last Saturday anyway. So when you were like, "Hey, next, let's move it," I was like, "Perfect."
Nice. So tell everybody where they can get your stuff because let's get some people behind it and tell everybody about the Kickstarter a little bit too. I mean, you already have pretty much laid it all out, but give some people some ideas of some of the perks if they want to get in there in the last few days to get
Yeah,
in.
we're getting pretty close to another stretch goal right now. So you're getting. I'll sign all the comics that people buy on the Kickstarter. You're getting the script, a PDF of the script, so you could
Right.
actually read the original script. This isn't like the tailored one that we changed. This is the original, so you could actually read the comic and the script and see how it changed along the way. And I think, let's see, they're getting a PDF or a digital copy of Night Wolf #1 through Lone Wolf Comics was another stretch goal.
Nice.
They're creeping up on our next stretch goal. We're like little under 200 away from that, and it's a digital copy of Tales of Shock and Terror, which is like a Tales from the Crypt book that Cutthroat Comics we published.
Nice.
I edited it, but it's a whole nother creative team. So we're creeping up on that. If we get to 2,000, I'm gonna give away some magnets and stuff. But it's a fun book if you like superhero stuff. But this is not. I don't suspect anybody has seen superhero like I do superhero.
Yeah. Probably not.
Yeah, I don't think so. It's got enough tongue in cheek, but it's dark and gritty, and then it's also got some like depression and sadness and some real deal shit that these characters are going through. The books aren't about their powers; they're about
Mm,
the character. Um, but it gets pretty silly sometimes too. So,
mm.
but that's the comics.
So where can people go and see all this? Come on now.
Yeah, cutthroatcomics.com is a great place. TikTok, Instagram, Twitter for the moment. We'll see how that goes.
You're
Uh,
right.
yeah,
We're all with bated breath on that one.
yeah, we'll see. I made a Hive account, but that app, I don't know. They need to fix it. I don't know if you're on it, but it
Not
shuts
yet.
down like every 10 seconds, like it'll just close, and it's like, all
Uh,
right.
yeah, no, I'm being steered toward Mastodon, and I'm not so sure I want to do that yet.
Yeah, I looked at it. It looked confusing, but
Yeah, it's a little different. It's not what people. I don't. People are saying it's an alternative to Twitter, and I don't really find it all that much to be
you
that.
know,
I don't know. We'll see. I mean, I'm hoping that this all gets resolved and nothing happens. But I mean, whatever happens, you just roll with it. It's not like the first time of social media's. I mean, this is probably one of the biggest ones to ever shut down, and
yep,
and do
yeah.
it so publicly. But it'll be interesting to see how it goes.
Yeah, it's a fun ride. We'll see. I mean, social media, it comes in waves. I feel like that's what's going to happen. I think Facebook's going to go out, and TikTok eventually will get replaced by something else. And
Yeah,
that's life. We'll just
yeah.
all have to adapt and get out of our comfort zones and do stuff we're not comfortable doing. So
Yeah. I mean, there is something reassuring about the longevity of a Twitter or a Facebook or a YouTube, but
right,
and they will always probably still be there in some form or fashion. But yeah, I think people get fed up with the politics and the individuality, tailoring and the going toward more of an ad based revenue stream than a friendly confines idea. But
right.
who knows? I mean, like you said, You just roll with it and you go with it and you do what you got to do, right?
Yep, you got to learn to adapt. You know, as an artist, unfortunately, that's one of the hardest things that I think a lot of artists fail at. You
Yep.
you have to be able to jump into something you're not comfortable with doing and be successful at it, or at
Yeah,
least try. You know,
for
it's
sure.
you know, at cons and stuff, I see a lot of artists. You know, they'll just sit there and they'll be sitting there, and people will walk by their table and they don't say anything and they just walk on by.
Yeah.
It's, you know, and I get that it's tough to be at cons and be excited and talk to people and all that, but that's part of it. You
Yeah.
gotta you gotta find a way to find a balance between uh, antisocial and social and all that.
Yeah. Well, I appreciate you being social with me for this last hour. It's been a wonderful conversation, my friend. So thank you
Uh,
so much. And
I appreciate it, man.
everybody remember it's always time to go indie now, and we'll see you again soon. Everybody, take care.